How's it going, YouTube? Comments in today with another video, and today, guys, what the brand new is going to be the brand new Where to Hand Trap. I really do appreciate all the support, and I've been getting an overwhelming amount of comments for the brand new Where to Hand Trap, and let me tell you, it's here. I really do try to wait between new Where to Hand Traps because I don't want to give you a video that's just kind of like reiterating information if nothing's really changed. I really value all your time when it comes to my videos, and I want to make an impact into your gameplay and try to be as up to date as possible. So definitely take that in consideration when you're looking at this video. This is one of those things where we will continue to see nuances and changes into the format, but as of right now, this is the most accurate as far as the different interactions that I can see. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on RW, Cloud, Gem, Arla, Imperium, Dragonshield, and Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description. If you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, share the channel with your friends, like the video, show me that you really enjoy the Where to Hand Traps because it makes me want to do so much more. So thank you all so much. I really want to hit 30,000 by the end of the year, so let's go ahead and do that because Where to Hand Trap is just such a staple, and I love that I can do this for everyone. And honestly, like, if you are doing well and the hand trap videos are helping, let me know down below. I love that when someone walks up to me, they're like, hey, like, I topped the regional because of these videos. Like, that's amazing. Thank you so much for just watching my videos, and I'm glad that you're getting something from it. But without further ado, let's hop right into Where to Hand Trap. So I have some pretty extensive slides for you today that I really want to go over. So the first one today is going to be Crystron, and I'm going to be going through each and every single card here very in depth because I want you to understand why we're playing certain cards. Now, one of the hand traps that have become a staple moving forward into this format is DD Crow. DD Crow is really strong. It has a lot of very good application in the different matchups. We'll get into other interactions as we go, but this is Crystron, and so the very cool interaction you have in this deck is the fact that you can go ahead and just get rid of things like the Smyger and Grave, so you don't have to worry about it later on. These banish for cost, so that's one thing where you're not going to get away with your usual cards, or even like a Bestiole because most of them are water, so it makes it really difficult if you want to go ahead and interact with them. So DD Crow, another very generically good card that if you run into matchups like this, you're really not too far behind. The next thing too is going to be Nibiru. You want to throw this before Nova hits the board. It is definitely going to be a problem if Nova does, because you cannot Nibiru on Nova, and you definitely don't want to Nibiru onto Infinity unless you have like Nibiru Imperm. Then you can just go ahead and annihilate the board whenever, right? So that's fine. But then you also, if you're waiting that long, make sure that you don't do anything and they put up like a Dawn Dragster or like a Spell Trap Negate, because then you're really behind, right? And that sucks. So make sure that you are dropping rock before Nova hits the board. It is a rank 5, so whenever you start seeing the 5s hit the board, you want to drop rock. It's kind of similar to where you would see like Engraver and Necroquip. Now you're doing it before the 2 5s make an Exceed. Bell on Vampire, it does mill to Grave and then summon, so it is a summon from the grave, so Bell is really solid. I did add Droll up top here because of the fact that we're seeing a lot more search engines in this deck. We're also seeing the Horse Engine being a staple, so if you can catch this deck off guard with Droll, it can be pretty solid in the right spot. It might not be the best card, but in this matchup, it can still be very impactful. Impulse and Lancia are going to be your go-tos. Like, those are insane in this matchup. Being able to Impulse Solfador is really strong, so that's something that you want to consider. And then you have Ash on the Smyger as well. You don't really want your opponent to get to things like Inclusion, especially if they already have Solvador in hand. So I'm trying to just cut off access to Inclusion. I'm not trying to just like negate Inclusion. If they start that, then sure, I'll negate it and hope they don't have Solvador. But if I see the Smyger come down early, I'm just going to go ahead and stop that as soon as possible. Ogre onto the Cluster. Of course, this is fantastic. Cluster is very annoying to deal with, and if you're a Maliss player, you know that Cluster can be very annoying because of the very first line, so you want to make sure that you get rid of that as soon as possible. And then you also want to just go ahead and negate the effect of Sulfador because you don't want them to double Foolish. Of course, that'd be so bad. So that's something that you want to go ahead and stop as soon as possible. The next one here is going to be Mitsu. Now, I didn't break Mitsu down to like pure Mitsu, Fiendsmith Mitsu, or like Ryzeal Mitsu. I'm just going with the Ryzeal Mitsu because that's going to be the most common one that you're going to see. That's going to be the strongest one in the room. And of course, this could change with time, but overall, it's going to be the strongest one. So I want to make sure that I cover this, whereas the other ones, I don't really think you'll see as much. But I think the biggest difference is just if you're playing against pure, you're going to see Wosu, which is the Kaiji. That card's pretty crazy, and they also play Impulse. But other than that, the Ryzeal variant is just inherently better. It's really strong and has a lot more flexibility, so you're probably going to see this one the most. So starting off with the obvious one, Ogre or any negation possible onto Duo Drive. You just want to stop Duo Drive. Do not let them have this card. Another card that you could stop with like a Valor or an Imperium is if your opponent opens only Mitsurugi cards, you see them make a rank 4 and they go for like the Code Igniter. That's a really good sign that you have to just stop that card because it's a rank 4 Exceed that just allows you to ritual summon. So that shows you that their hand's pretty lackluster and they need that ritual to go off. So that's something to think about. So the next thing here is going to be Ash and Bell onto Prayer. This card can summon from the grave, so you can Bell it. You also can just Ash the Search. Otherwise, you can just wait for the actual effect of Habakiri and just go ahead and Ash the effect of Habakiri. I like that a little bit more, especially if my opponent goes like Draw Phase, Prayers, Tribute a card. You could just go ahead at that point and just like Ash the Prayers. I think the best card, honestly, to go ahead after is just negate the Saji. So like you could Ash like the Habakiri, you could Ash or Bell the Prayer. I really do think that it's really important to think about this because if you stop the Saji, you stop the weight to the spell, and you put them on Better Heart Open the ritual or tribute one of your rituals so that you can search it. Otherwise, they're going to go Prayers and get like a double search. It's pretty awful to deal with. You can't Bell Habakiri, but you can Bell Prayer, Ash Prayer, and then you can also Ash Habakiri. That's why it's there. But I think that these are really optimal, but I do think that there are a lot of situations where ashing the Saji could just be correct. It just depends because you can still search, but you would have to tribute like a ritual, so it's going to be a little different. The next one here is just going to be on the Ameno, the Murakamo. This card is the Regeki of the deck, and it's very annoying to deal with. So if your opponent ever goes ahead and just like tributes the Ameno to grave, you can just Bestial it out, and then it's going to be on your opponent to just Kusanagi it back if they can. So that's going to be a problematic situation, or if it's tributed and then you can Bell the return of Ameno, that's going to be your best bet. So if you're really patient on your hand traps, right, you could just Ash the ritual spell on the summon from deck, and then just go ahead and Bell the Murakama trying to come back to the board. And a lot of times it can be more correct to just Bell Murakama on your own turn. Because if they have that on board, and then your opponent uses like Purification and tributes the Murakama to come back, and then they try to bring it back for like their Geki, and you Bell it on your own turn, like, it's so good. Like, they have to have Prayers at that point, and if they use Prayers, and you're, like, drawing out multiple interruptions, right? So, that's really important, too. There's a lot of very good interactions. It just depends on how patient you want to be. So, just to kind of break that down a little bit more, and I know I'm going a little bit more, like, far on this topic, but it's a really complicated matchup. So, there's a lot of different instances where you kind of have to think about like what you want to do based on like what your opponent has and what they're showing you, right? So you can Ash Saji, which is great because you cut off access to a spell. If they have a ritual to tribute, they're going to get to it anyway, right? So you could always hypothetically wait for the ritual spell and just Ash the summon from deck, which is always pretty solid. But usually if your opponent already has like Habakiri, they'll try to summon that first and then use like the Murakamo after. But it just depends on how they open. You also can go ahead and Bell Prayer, but if you're really patient, you can just wait till your own turn and then Bell Murakamo on your own turn so that your opponent can't get that free advantage back. They're not going to get that Regeki on your turn. There's a lot of very good positives to just being patient. And that's what hand traps are all about, honestly, is being patient. If you watch someone just kind of like throw their hand traps on the board immediately and still lose, it's because they just don't know where to throw them. They're not watching the videos, you know? So that's one thing where be patient, situations are unique. You start seeing very weird situations pop up. Their hands aren't that good, or they like are trying to push a playthrough, and you kind of have to determine how important that play is on the fly. So these are the things to look for and kind of the steps of what is important and what is not. Because yes, again, even like DD Crow, if your opponent goes draw phase prayer and they tribute Saji, you can just DD Crow Saji immediately. And then your opponent's in a really weird spot because now they have to add off prayer like a Habakiri and try to get back to Saji, but they can't. So they have to get like Kusanagi because everyone only plays like one Aramasa, one Saji, and one Kusanagi. So it's really awkward if they go prayer to Saji and you crow it. That's almost GG. Like, it's rough for them. So that's something to think about. If your opponent attributes a Murakamo for cost, you can always go ahead and DD Crow that as well because it'll be in a new location. It won't activate the Summoner Search, which is great. You also can DD Crow the Ritual spell coming back to hand, so you cut off the other summon, which is pretty solid. Or you can even just Impulse the Ritual spell. So, all very optimal lines. If you want to have me do a video specifically just on like different variants of Mitsurugi and like lines of thought around different plays that they can do, I can definitely do that. Let me know down in the comments below. But I hope that you like the little like rant about it because there are a lot of different things that you have to consider. I think one of my favorite hits in this deck is definitely when they go Prayer Tribute Saji and you crow it. It's just so detrimental. It's so good. So consider that. But definitely a lot of ways that you can hit this deck. Now for Maliss, there's a lot of different things to consider here as well. So Droll isn't even like that bad in the matchup. You're never keeping it in or like siding it in, but it's still not bad game one if you just have it because there's a lot of search cards now. But realistically, a lot of the ways we were hand trapping this deck didn't change. That's why I don't really want to spend too much time on it. So Nibiru is really going to depend on what your Maliss opponent's doing. If your opponent's just kind of popping off, and you see them like attempting to go for like an Akko Talker and they're gonna have like an arrow pointing to it, then you preemptively drop rock 100%, right? If you see like the 3, the 1, and the 1, you're like, all right, I'm dropping rock now. Because even if you make them at a half board, it's still a lot better than watching an opponent make a full board. So even where Nibiru is like lackluster, it's still gonna be pretty good. I do think, though, that there's a lot of situations where, like, a lot of people will have Maliss and a lot of people will just play it bad. That's just the hard facts of this deck. Like, people will just play this deck awful. And then you can just, like, drop rock and you're like, oh, that's crazy. But if they're a better player, they're just going to have Link Spider and they're going to hold back up as long as possible. So you go rock and then they go, cool, Link 1, backup, wizard, right? Like, that sucks. So you kind of have to gauge how your opponent is playing, if they've already used backup, if they already used wizard, and kind of like gauge from there. But there's a lot of times, like if your opponent opens backup and they just go normal summon backup, like Nibiru's pretty good, you know, like it's not a bad card. So you definitely want to consider your options on that. Magnamut's the same thing. I'm typically siding out Bestials in this matchup. I don't really like those. I'd rather have other cards like Bell or like a Perulia, right? Or a Meowls. It's just dependent on if you're going first or second and what your main or your side are looking like. So definitely Bestials are a weird one. If you're already playing Maliss and you're playing a mirror match, then you want to keep them in when you're going first because they're extender, pseudo. But they're like okay. So that's why I have the question mark here. It's just kind of like, like they're fine. But they're not like be all end all. I still think Super Poly against this deck is correct. Bell into the field spell. Field spell is like really crazy. People are still hard opening that more than they opened it before, which is wild because now it's at 2 and they still see it way more. I still believe in just belling the binder effect. You could hit GWC, but I'd rather just like hit the problem, right? Instead of my opponent going, oh, anyways, activate hair, banish it, and it comes back. They just have so many ways to bring it back anyway. Like even if you deal with GWC, so I'm always just belling the effect of binder to banish because that's gonna do a whole lot more for you than belling GWC and watching your opponent go, yeah, I'm gonna activate hair, right? And that just feels terrible. Ash onto Chessie. If that's their normal summon, they go normal summon Chessie effect. I'm ashing it 100%. 100%. Like, I'm throwing Ash because Ash is awful in this matchup unless they're playing like Silent Minings, or if they like lead backup, you better believe that's catching the Ash. It just depends on what your opponent starts with. And I hate Ash on terraforming. The only time that's ever been correct is in like Mystic Mine format, where you're like, well, I don't want to get stuck under mine, right? But if I know I'm playing against Maliss and they go activate terraforming, I'm ashing it. Just because you don't want your opponent to get the underground. Maybe that's their only way to play. You got to remember, like, Maliss still bricks a good amount. So that's one thing where, like, if they throw Terra, I might just ash it. Especially if I have the, like, Ash Impulse. I might just take a chance. And a lot of times, too, you got to consider that, like, if you have a low impact hand trap in your hand, it's your only hand trap you have, and they open terraforming and your only hand trap is Ash, sometimes you just got to throw it and pray. You know, you just gotta be like, I hope this is enough. MTP, of course, is always gonna be a good Ash target. It's always gonna be solid. Cut off access from hair, and then also the banish. Ogring a Link too, that's never really going to change. We're still going to be doing that. Make sure your opponent doesn't have the bodies. And then any kind of negation you have onto Dormouse, that also doesn't really change here. If you're in a pretty comfy spot, Nibiru in the White Forest matchup can be pretty helpful. It can also be pretty bad because your opponent could already have like a pretty established board. But overall, I don't really hate the fact that like Nibiru can just simplify the board. It's realistically for me just like an end of main thing, unless you start seeing like hard negates popping up like Dragoon or something, right? But it's not really common. The only thing that you could really see is going to be like Sylvie. So if you have like Valor or Imperm, you want to like Imperm first and then drop Rock because it does tribute for cost. But if you know that you can drop Rock before they summon out something like Sylvie, then just go ahead and do so, right? And even if you can't get to like an Imperm and they have it before, you can still just drop Rock and then they'll chain the Sylvie and you're like, alright, cool, the negate is out of the way for next turn, right? So even if it's not the best card, I would still side it out game 2 or 3. But like for now in game 1, it's not too bad. You still at least trade for something. Diabellstar Vengeance is really annoying to deal with. Your opponent gets a free summon, they get a pop. So definitely just go ahead and like DD Crow or Bestial it out of grave if they're trying to reborn it from grave. Same with Bell, just like make sure this card does not hit the board right. But you can also impulse the effect to pop because it does summon a card. So that's something to also consider. This is like the big bad in the deck, right? You want to make sure that you just turn this off as soon as possible because that's really annoying to deal with. You also can just like banish out the Arlagames. So when they go through combo and they go like Arlagames and they have like the Hollow Desmina, they try to put back the fusion so they can summon Sylvie. If you just get rid of the fusion, they're in a really weird spot because they can't return the Hollowed anymore. So that's a really fun one. You want to make sure you clear that as soon as possible. You can still Bell the Wanted poster. It's still not awful. It's still something that you can do. I'm always ashing Elza. If they start Elza, that thing's getting ashed 10 out of 10. I'm either impulsing this, I'm ashing this, or I'm impulsing the other Elzat because they're both very strong. Or you could just ash the field spell. It depends on what you want to deal with more. But if my opponent opens Elza, there's not a doubt in my mind I'm just throwing Ash immediately because I don't want to deal with this. Ogre onto the Deception. Again, this isn't really going to change. I'd also consider ashing Deception. If they don't have Elzat or you haven't seen Elzat immediately, I'm probably just ashing this. Just so my opponent doesn't get to the Hollow Desmina because that card's really annoying to deal with. And then Valor Imperm onto Sylvie. This will never change for the most part. If my opponent leads Sylvie, it's just getting negated every time, right? It's like if your opponent leads like Alistair, right? You're just like, not today, right? So definitely something to consider. Nibiru against Blue Eyes can be really good or really bad. It just depends on how your opponent's playing. If they're playing like Fiendsmith cards or how much they're extending. Because you can really hit a player off guard with Nibiru in that matchup, but like if they already have Seal on board, I really wouldn't want to Nibiru that. Unless you just lose to the Seal, then you can just drop Rock, and then they get a summon of like Magnemite, right? And then they potentially get like a Juris Worm. So if you don't really care about the Bestial more than you cared about the Seal, you gotta weigh that as you're going, right? Or if you have like Nib and then Ash and they try to summon, you just Ash it, right? You're going to want to Ash Wishes. This card is just Melody. It's in Archetypal Melody. The card's really good. You're gonna want to make sure that you banish out the Maiden or Bell the Maiden. Don't let them get to their Spirit Dragon. You don't want that. Ogre on True Light, and then Valor Imperm on Barrel. Like, if they summon Barrel, I'm hitting it 10 out of 10, right? Like, I do not want my opponent to get to Drillbane loops. Like, that card is super annoying. And then Lordly Load is also just a very strong card. And then if you have the backup Valor or Imperm, or even like an Ash, right, that they haven't used Witches yet, you can also go ahead and cut off the effect of Spirit because you do not want your opponent to be able to get to the field spell. You can always ogre the field spell as well. That's a really strong route because your opponent just doesn't have it anymore. They don't get the free summon if they haven't already used that. They also don't get to dump like Blue Eyes to their graveyard, which is really good. If you enjoyed today's video, definitely go ahead and check out my Twitch, Twitter, Discord, Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. I appreciate each and every one of you. Let's hit 30,000 subscribers, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.